They're two happy women bringing you inspiring stories, politics, pop culture, and lifestyle hacks, all with an eye to making our communities and our country a better place to live. It's the Happy Women Podcast with your hosts, Jen Horn and Katie Gorka.
Thanks for joining us and welcome to another episode of the Happy Women Podcast. I'm Jennifer Horn.
And I'm Katie Gorka.
And we are still basking in the glow, I'm going to say it right now, of President Trump being back in office. Doesn't that feel so good? I mean, it still feels good to say that, Katie.
Oh, it's going to for weeks, if not months.
The difference, the transparency, the access, the output of work, it's fabulous. And I know things are only going to get better as President Trump gets his staff confirmed and added around him into the cabinet. But we're going to talk about the inauguration. We're going to talk about what the election and now inauguration of President Trump means for women and for life issues in our country. And to do all of that, we are joined by Katherine Hamilton. She is a politics reporter covering mostly pro-life issues for Breitbart, Breitbart.com for all your latest news. And you can follow her at @Kat_Hamilton. And it's great to have you, Katherine. Thanks so much for joining us on the Happy Women Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So before we jump into some of the issues and what things may look like over the next 4 years, we love to know a little bit about you. I said off air, you're a fabulous woman doing fabulous things in politics. So we love to know what the catalyst was. How did you get here today? Tell us about your story.
It's actually an interesting story. Right out of college, I accepted a job at an NBC station, like a local NBC affiliate, and I wasn't super political at all. I was always raised Christian conservative, but I just wasn't really paying attention. I was into features and more things like that. And then COVID hit, and then BLM hit, and Biden won the election. And I started looking around, and I remember I called my dad and I said, "Dad, you were right." And I quickly tried to get in touch with conservative news outlets. And I've been with Breitbart ever since, going on 4 years in September. So,
wow.
I love that. We are huge fans of Breitbart and just love what they do. And I love that you're there because I sometimes think of it as a boys club, but I know it's not. It's a little boy heavy, but I'm glad that they've got some powerful female voices there. All right. So I would love to hear your perspective on the weekend. I got to go to a number of events, the Turning Point Ball, the Hispanic Ball, met with some conservative European leaders, conservative Latin American, South American leaders. I had my own sort of personal highs and lows of the weekend, but I'd love to hear some of yours. What were some of your experiences? What were some of your favorite moments?
Oh, my favorite moment was watching him be sworn in, and then the beautiful music that came after. Carrie Underwood's performance,
amazing. The
opera performance. It's just, honestly, I did shed a tear, guys. I'm not going to lie. And I would say it's nice to have a president who knows what a woman is again. With some of his executive orders coming out. So those are real highlights for me, just watching him be sworn in after he fought so hard over the last 4 years and even before that during his first term. And then to see him jump straight into action the way that he did, going all night, basically, to really try to undo what Biden's done in the last 4 years. Those are major highlights for me.
I have to tell you, the Carrie Underwood, America the Beautiful song was so amazing. And you saw her, the music didn't start the way it was supposed to. There was obviously a technical glitch. And boy, I start to think to myself, I get nervous saying the Pledge of Allegiance in front of a crowd, right? Nobody wants to screw that up. But to actually have to sing America the Beautiful and do it a cappella, she handled it beautifully. And one of the things I love, because I'm just a sap, is watching everybody, Democrat and Republican, join her and sing kind of in a unified way, America the Beautiful. I mean, that's really where we are, singing that song even after all this fighting. I thought that was great. So I love that you pointed that out. You also said tongue in cheek that we now know what a man is and what a woman is. Can you speak to that, Katherine? Because I think, look, I'm all for this executive order from President Trump actually having to clarify this, but can you believe we are at a place where a sitting president actually has to say men are men and women are women, and eventually we'll have to say that only women can play in women's sports and men will only play in men's sports? I mean, it's just kind of crazy, but here we are.
You know, it reflects a culture in chaos, I think, when we can't agree on basic issues, what a man is, what a woman is, facts that have, kept civilization going for thousands of years, really. So I think it's something that maybe some people do buy into, kind of like that man that stole luggage from women that worked for the Biden administration. But I think there's a lot of people who use gender ideology to confuse people. If we're debating what a man is and what a woman is, we're not going to be talking about other important issues that are going on. So it is sad that we have to have a president who distinguishes what a man and what a woman is, but I am so grateful that we have one and that he tackled it so aggressively. And I think he did so in a way that appeals not just to conservatives, but to independents and even some Democrats that felt left behind by their party on this issue.
So the Biden administration really went after women with its Title IX guidance, where it tried to, Title IX was so important when it came out. It really impacted me personally because I was a college student when Title IX came out, and I had been on a club soccer team, which was really tough. And then suddenly we had the status of being an NCAA team, which was, it was a big deal. It was not a small thing for women and women's sports to get Title IX, where women would get equal sort of resources and treatment as men. That was huge. The Biden administration came along with its Title IX guidance to rewrite that idea of equality for women as for men, to make it all about gender. And then, of course, transgender got really almost like elevated to the top of the heap. So undoing that has been really, really important. But I'm just curious, with the Supreme Court decision that put that ended Roe v. Wade and put the decision making back down to the states on abortion, what role do you see for President Trump in this? Do you think, I know it's hard to sort of look into the crystal ball and predict the future, but sort of based on things that he has said up till now, do you think he's going to be an active voice on life issues? Or do you think now that he's kind of said, okay, men are men and women are women, let's move on, do you think he'll leave it alone and let that debate go on down at the state level?
I don't think he seems like he wants to engage in that debate as much now that it's gone back to the states. I know that pro-life groups are really pushing the debate around the abortion pill. Now that we have states with shield laws, sending them into pro-life states, and it's a whole battle going on there. What I could see him doing is maybe doing what he did during his campaign, which is speaking up about the late-term abortions that are happening. Especially in DC, we have that case of the 5 late-term aborted babies that a lot of House members have brought to attention of the American people. So they might bring that up to Trump as well, and maybe something could be done about that. But I see him leaving it to the states, and the states really battling out, not just in the law and in court, but also through these amendments that we've already seen in the midterms and this last election.
I think you almost have to. Katie lives in Virginia. I live in California. And sometimes the abortion issue can be one that strips people away from your party instead of bringing people in. It's unfortunate because I consider myself to be staunchly pro-life. I think all of us that are here to get together believe that. But you also have to figure out how you can get the most done. And I think it would be really hard. And I'm curious to know your thoughts on this, Katherine, from your perspective. It's hard to say we're sending it back to the states, supporting that great decision by the Supreme Court, and then having more federal mandates. Although in my heart, I would really like to see the federal government do something, as you mentioned, about late-term abortions, because there's really not much difference between a 9-month-old fetus and a 1-month-old baby.
Among pro-lifers, they really say there's a federal right to life, a constitutional right to life, and that should apply to all living beings, including those in the womb. And as a Christian, especially, I would lean that way. But I do understand politically, after the Dobbs decision, sending it back to the states, something that we've worked so hard for as a pro-life movement for 50 plus years, to then immediately say we're bringing it back to the federal level, that might not set well with a lot of people, especially people that are more in the middle on the issue. So I understand it politically, even if it doesn't necessarily align with what I would want or a lot of pro-life people want.
So we were all so hyper-focused on the inauguration that I feel like the March for Life kind of got a little bit neglected, but that's a huge event. That's happening on Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. Will you be there? Will you be covering it? Are you expecting anything sort of surprising this year? And importantly, do you know if anybody from the administration will be there?
I actually am not sure. I'm based out of Florida, but I know that we always have somebody cover, go on the ground and really interview people who are part of the movement. I imagine what they're going to be focusing on, especially because we may not have federal action, is really getting out their message to people, to voters, to understand what is life in the womb, what does choice really mean, and what is the propaganda that these abortion organizations and Democrats have been pushing for years. So if they can get to the culture, I think they believe they'll have more luck pushing legislation in the future.
Now, one of the stories that you have, and you do great work for Breitbart, is about the release of the information surrounding the assassination of RFK and of JFK and MLK, all initials, but Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy as well. This is something that people have asked for a long time. President Trump had alluded to releasing it the first time around. It's interesting. It's kind of almost like the aliens. You know, every president goes into office saying, we're going to tell you about aliens. And then all of a sudden it's very buttoned up. But this time I really believe that President Trump will give us what he promised. And I know that he's got RFK Jr. in there who's pushing for this. What do you anticipate we learn? How much of this information do you think that actually makes it out to the public? Because it seems President Trump is even more serious about transparency this time in office.
When he discussed releasing these records on the Joe Rogan interview that got so much attention before the election, he called doing so a cleansing. And I think he really, really wants to emphasize this transparency because I think especially over the last 5 years, maybe not 5, but 4, we've had a lot of things going on with the government that the American people just want to know. They want to know what's going on. COVID, the lockdowns, Jeffrey Epstein, Hunter Biden laptop, and we have things going back decades that have impaired people's ability to trust our government. And so I don't know what will come out. I don't know if it will be something that indicts government agencies that were potentially involved, as RFK Jr. believes and has said he believes. But I think it will really repair people's relationship with the government in the sense of they can't hide forever. And I think people want to know what's going on.
It's interesting that you think that, and I love the fact that you wrote this article. I think it's going to be unbelievably interesting. I worry it's going to have the opposite effect. You think it's going to repair? Well, yes, I think you're right in the sense that I think it could repair people's relationship with government in the sense that they will have tangible evidence that Trump is addressing it. He's being honest for the first time. I mean, he's forcing honesty for the first time about some of the things our government has really done. But I also think it's going to be shocking. I mean, I have to say my own view of the government and of these agencies has changed so dramatically in the last 4 to 8 years, as we've seen just some of the different things that people in government have done. And, the last one, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at this, but if you haven't, I completely commend this book to you. We had Adam Lovinger on a week or 2 ago, who's got a book called Insider Threat. And it is just such a shock to see what people inside our own government have done. And I will also say this, I am very, very down on conspiracy theories. I'm like, don't go there. There's no reason to go there. If you've got evidence, then yes, absolutely. But don't go down a path if you don't have the evidence. And so even as much as I think 6 months ago, if you had said to me, I think the CIA was involved in RFK Jr.'s assassination, I would have been like, forget it. That's ridiculous. I'm not so sure now.
I was going to say.
Yeah.
Conspiracy theories had started coming true. That's the thing. That's what makes people engage in them.
Yeah.
No, it's hard to know, honestly, because, with what we've seen with what the government's done over the last few years, who's to say what they did back then? And so, yes, I agree with the way you worded it, which is it will do good things for Trump. I don't know if it will do good things for the deep state, as we say, and how they may have handled it back then.
And just digging in a little bit more, I know none of us have the answers. This is all speculation, but I think both of you ladies are right in the fact that this will look good for Trump, because if President Trump makes the promise to deliver, I think that's important. But I just wonder what is going to be delivered on, because I actually do believe that there was some bad actors within our government, particularly when it comes to JFK, that are not going to be cited in any documents. I mean, if the swamp is as we believe the swamp to be, they are not going to have just documents incriminating themselves lying around. So I think even if you send out the most redacted of documents, I don't know that people are going to get all the answers that they want, sadly. And I think that's going to cause disappointment because you've got a lot of people out there who are hopeful that they're going to finally get answers. And I just wonder if those answers even exist after they've been sitting around with all the swamp creatures having access to them for 50 years. It just, I don't know. It seems to me that might be an issue.
Yeah, I mean, we do see the preemptive pardon with Dr. Fauci that just happened. So they tend to look out for themselves. So who knows what we'll actually find out. But I do think it does carry some significance for Trump this time around, too, because before he had people, he mentioned specifically Mike Pompeo. He said he was well-meaning, but he kind of said, hey, let's leave that for another day. And he didn't release all of the documents. But this time he faced an assassination attempt himself. I mean, that bullet almost hit his brain and missed it by mere centimeters. And so I think he might feel a certain kinship, perhaps.
Yeah. With no answers, by the way. We still don't have answers about that shooter.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that point about Pompeo. I hadn't actually heard that. And there's such an interesting parallel with Nixon, because I think there were actually, I'm absolutely adamant and convinced that Nixon was in fact the first victim of the deep state. And I think I'm hoping that actually that might be also one of the other things that comes out. Elements of that have been coming out as more people have, who were sort of a part of it early on are coming out over the last few years saying more about it. But Nixon went through a similar experience where he was inaugurated in January, and that November or December, he realized, or somebody in his administration realized, that the naval attaché, the military attaché from the Joint Chiefs to the White House. So the person who was responsible for going over to the White House for briefings and then carrying that information back to the Joint Chiefs, that person was actually stealing documents from Kissinger and Nixon and taking them back to the Joint Chiefs. So the Joint Chiefs effectively were using this person to spy on Nixon and Kissinger for their own purposes, right? And Nixon did something similar to what Pompeo did. He said, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to sort of ruin relationships with the Joint Chiefs, whatever. And he didn't do anything about it. And I think that was his fatal flaw. And something very similar in a way, I think, happened to Mike Flynn, where, just a few days into the new administration, the first Trump administration, the NSC phone book, which is a classified document, was leaked. And Flynn really should have investigated that and identified the leaker. I hate saying anything that's critical of General Flynn because I'm such a fan of his, but still, I think, he didn't want to rock the boat at that early stage. And like 3 days later, they brought him down. I think there's so much in us that we feel, and I think this is very much something sort of, particularly among Christians and conservatives. We believe that if we behave nobly and respectfully and respect the dignity of other people and think the best of them, that they will do the same for us. And it is not true. It is not true. I think we've got to be as hard on them as they have been on us. And I don't think that means we sort of betray our principles, but I just think time for Mr. Nice Guy is over.
Yeah, what is that verse? Be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. I think we need to be shrewd. And, I don't know that we knew, at least I didn't, but I wasn't in the administration. We didn't know how bad it was. We didn't know everything that we were up against. And I think we've had 4 years to see what we're up against and to plot and plan to get out the early vote. And I think Trump this time is surrounding himself with different people. He's going in wiser this time, knowing more of the landscape, more as a seasoned politician. And so maybe we'll see more bold moves like this now that he's surrounding himself with different people.
And I think people that didn't fit into the box that the swamp or the establishment wanted to put them in. You've got people who are there who have been loyal to him. And I think that's absolutely important. We need to go in there and figure out how to dig out the swamp in a short amount of time. And one of the biggest swamp creatures, I think, and you alluded to this, Katherine, is Dr. Fauci. These preemptive pardons by Joe Biden have set a crazy precedence now that we will see moving forward in our country. The fact that he's doing a preemptive pardon for his family, for the January 6th committee. I mean, it used to mean to me that unless you were, and look, I think it's a little different with the January 6ers. The January 6ers were convicted of crimes. They were treated as political prisoners. They get commutations. They get pardons from the president. And you've seen them go through a process. When you start preemptively taking note of people around you who could have done something wrong, and one of them is Dr. Fauci, who led us into in my case, in California, a 2-year shutdown, damaging people, having people die alone, not being able to be with their families, having people lose their livelihoods, their businesses. That's a real problem. And I have heard Rand Paul say that he is going to continue to call Fauci and they're going to continue to try to get to the bottom of this. Do you believe that? Do you think there's still going to be an appetite to try to figure out what went wrong with these people who have been preemptively pardoned by Biden, or will they just gloss over it and focus on something else?
I hope they have an appetite before it, because I feel that the American people are still affected by this. I mean, the education scores still haven't rebounded. Some people permanently lost their businesses. Some people are really suffering, lost their jobs, weren't able to pay for treatments, all the things that you mentioned as well. And so I think if they knew what was good, they would do it and they would pursue it. For more than sound bites. And, I'm not trying to sound mean, but for more than sound bites, for more than getting a spot on the news, actually pursuing answers and information that happened, because people deserve to know. And the biggest thing is that if we don't know, and we see this throughout history, if we don't get answers, this could happen again. Who's to say another disease doesn't come around? Who's to say something else doesn't happen where they feel the need to seize that kind of power? People do not want that again. And so I think it's imperative that they do.
So I want to shift gears a little bit, because it's sort of fun to talk to you being a younger woman, much younger than me, a little bit younger than Jen. A couple things have come up in the last week with the hearings that I just would love to get your take on. One of them is, I think the big one that I'm really curious about, and I've been really mulling this over and sort of sitting with this and trying to figure out how I feel about this, the whole question about women in combat. And I'm just curious your take on that. How did you feel about what you were hearing from Pete Hegseth and also some of the commentators? There's been a lot of commentary on that. Any thoughts, any reaction?
I think the biggest thing that I've noticed personally, and I think I'm about to age out of the draft, is it up to 26? I'm about to turn 27. Drafting women for the military, I'm not a big fan of that. And I'm all for women getting to do everything that they can, everything that they're capable of. But I think with the DEI things that we've seen with lowering standards, allowing transgender members of the military, paying for sex changes, all of that stuff is stuff that I'm very interested in, that we're already seeing rolled back. And I think Pete Hegseth is somebody that would be good on that and will stick up for what he believes in and what he said.
Jen, I don't know if you feel differently about this, but I think on this one, I sort of feel like I think I like where Pete Hegseth ended up, which I think is that he felt women can do what they want, but don't lower the standards. I mean,
Absolutely.
if you're gonna let a woman in, because I'm kind of the same way. I think I've known some incredible female pilots, for example, combat pilots, who've done an amazing job. And I feel like if a woman really wants to do that, I feel that she should be allowed. But I also think she's got to be able to do everything that the job requires. So, maybe being in a combat unit doesn't work, because I don't see most women being able to carry out, for example, an injured fellow soldier.
Yeah, I've always felt this way. I think women are very capable to do all the things that they want to do. I am very happy to stand with women who have dreams that they want to achieve. First of all, with the draft, I'm not for the draft in general. I don't think you get the best of the best. The people who have to be forced or compelled into a situation like that are never going to be the ones that you want to stand next to in combat. So I think anything that we can do to avoid the draft, whether that's for men or women or golden doodles, is imperative, because you want to bring in the people who actually want to be there. And I think if we start going back to civics and starting to teach about our great country again, you're going to see what happened with my generation, which is that a lot of the people that were my age enrolled in the military after 9/11 because they were so touched by what happened and they wanted to fight for our country. So I think if we get back to a love of country again, and if we can start teaching that, we're not going to need to even consider ideas about the draft. That being said, it's the same standard that I have for women in law enforcement, the same standard I have for women who want to be firefighters or paramedics. There is one set of standards. I think there, especially sadly in this generation, as we've kind of weakened what it means to be a man, there are plenty of women who can stand up and even be stronger than some men these days. So yep. I think as long as you have the same standards that everybody has to live by, and you can reach those, both mental and physical standards, go for it. I mean, I only want the strongest men, and I only want the strongest women if I'm stuck in a building and need someone to get me out. And I think that's where we need to be. Again, it is not in contrast with what President Trump's talking about when he's talking about getting back to merit-based employment, merit-based everything. That's where I believe where we need to be. Now, Katherine, I also want to ask you, just in our final moments here, what you're going to be looking forward to this next 4 years as a reporter. What is going to be your focus of this Trump administration? What are you going to be looking for? And how do you plan on covering the president and what he's looking at? There's going to be a lot of output that we're going to get from him, I have a feeling. If yesterday was any judge, or if his first day in office was any judge, I think there's going to be a large amount of output. So how do you plan on covering him, and what are you looking for?
So in the immediate future, I'm hopefully going to be covering some pro-life pardons, but that remains to be seen. So I'm keeping an eye out for that. Yep. But mostly I'm excited to dive into some education reporting. I haven't done that as much, but we have some big talk from Trump about getting rid of the Department of Education. And I think that could be truly, truly life-changing for a lot of people, whether people are in favor of it or not. But sending that power back to the states, back to local communities, it'll be interesting to see if we're able to effectively get that to happen and the different sides of the debate. So I look forward to getting to know more about that. But I think just as a whole, I'm looking forward to reporting on some wins, some conservative wins, rolling back this transgender insanity that we've seen, the battle that's playing out between the states with the abortion policies, and also just seeing people encouraged again. Seeing people that have fought, especially parents who have seen their schools taken over, who were treated as domestic terrorists by the former Department of Justice. I'm looking forward to seeing them getting everything that they've worked for and getting to cover that and see it for myself.
Back to you.
Katherine, I'm so glad you brought up the education thing, because I haven't talked about this, but one of the great events that I got to do this weekend was a Moms for Liberty event. And I learned two really interesting things that are going to be happening in the world of education. So we all know that Trump named Linda McMahon to be his Secretary of Education. And I think somewhere along the line, he said to her, if you do a really good job, you know that you're going to be putting yourself out of a job. So I loved that. But I wanted to just mention there are two other people that are going to be joining that fight who are both heroes of mine. One is Erica Donalds, the wife of Byron Donalds. She is, I mean, we all know Byron and love him for being such an outspoken hero, but Erica is incredible in her own right. She has been a school board member, I think chair of her school board, and then basically went on to create an education foundation and has been very innovative in the world of education. She is going to be heading up a program through the America First Policy Institute to help President Trump implement his educational priorities. The other change that's happening, which I think is really interesting, is Tiffany Justice, one of the co-founders of Moms for Liberty, is going over to the Heritage Foundation, also to help on education policy. So I think when you add all of this up together, I think it is going to be an incredibly exciting time for education. So it's one more thing to keep our eyes on, and we'll look forward to reading your coverage of the topic. So thank you, Katherine, for all you're doing.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
It's fantastic. You're doing such a great job, and you're welcome back here with us anytime. Katherine Hamilton, again, a political reporter for Breitbart, also special emphasis on pro-life reporting. You can give her a follow at @Hamilton, @Hamilton, and give her a follow. And of course, check out Breitbart.com each and every day for all your latest news. Katherine, thanks so much for being with us. And I want to remind you, don't forget to get Katie's book. It's called Next Gen Marxism, available right now wherever you get your books. You can check out our website, katiegorka.org, and you can search her on Facebook, Katherine Gorka, or on X, Gorka Katie. You can find me on social media as well, Jennifer Horn Radio on Facebook and Instagram, and at Jennifer Horn on X and on Truth. Those 5-star reviews, guys, really mean the world to us. Please continue to give us those reviews and share Happy Women with your friends. You can connect on all of our platforms by going to salempodcastnetwork.com, and you can find us wherever you get your podcast, video or audio. Thanks so much for joining us. It's another episode of the Happy Women Podcast.